Welcome to Psyche Magic, a podcast about self-discovery and the subconscious, where we explore the symbolic language of dreams, tarot, and archetypes. I'm your host, Jordan Hale. I'm a psychotherapist based in Nashville, Tennessee. Each episode, I'll hold a casual conversation with various artists and healers about their shadow work practices. We pull tarot cards, unpack a significant dream or dream theme, and discuss their personal healing arts practices. So please grab a cup of something delicious and stay a while. While aspects of this podcast may feel therapeutic, it is never meant to take the place of therapy. Welcome back to Psyche Magic. I'm so excited about this extra special episode. I got to interview visual artist Emily Weiner live and in person at her home studio here in East Nashville. And our lovely, depth-oriented conversation about psychology, philosophy, and art has been molding me ever since. In fact, I would say that our visit left me feeling especially inspired and reminded me why artists need each other, need community. I've been waking early, full of ideas, writing more regularly and across broader contexts. Stay tuned for an exciting announcement about a collaboration with an awesome publication. I even finally got my Substack off the ground. That's right. You can now find both the podcast and my weekly long-form exploratory essays on this platform. And speaking of community for artists, Substack will also be home to both live and recorded versions of our virtual salon ritual to invoke creative flow. The idea here is to phase out the Patreon and to streamline all of our content into one place with both free and paid subscriber options. Substack has been such an enriching, welcoming, and refreshing platform after all my wrestling with the various social media boxes that have never quite felt like a comfortable fit. This feels like a new chapter, and I hope you'll join me and follow along this trail of blissful creative breadcrumbs with us there. You can find the link in show notes, psychemagic.substack.com. One of the reasons I was so excited to get to interview Emily is that the art world is a space that's near and dear to me. I minored in art history during my time in undergrad at the University of Miami and got the opportunity to work at some amazing galleries in the Wynwood Arts District. We did this one incredible project where an artist handed out free disposable cameras to the people in the neighborhood and then made this beautiful grand scale collage full of snapshots of their daily lives. It was this really juicy, plastic time for my brain where I felt like the dynamic of honest art I was encountering was constantly shifting and expanding my perspective. Later on, I got the opportunity to work at the Broad Art Museum when I was living in Los Angeles, an incredible private collection of modern and contemporary art on display for free to the public. Truly a playground and teaching school for anyone and everyone. Wandering through the immersive worlds of Yayoi Kusama, Robert Rauschenberg, and Jean-Michel Basquiat awakened this deep commitment for me to living with art in as many ways as possible. I also got a free crash course review in these areas of art history as a part of my training, and there was something about the philosophical considerations of what constitutes art that these makers like Joseph Beuys and Marcel Duchamp were constantly grappling with that has shaped me and stuck with me in ways that I believe will keep me asking good questions about why we make the things we do and why it all matters. I experience Emily's work in this same way. It's powerful enough to keep me asking more and more questions, to cultivate curiosity. And anything that can do that makes us healthier, saner, wiser. So much of our conversation centered around holding this tension between the conscious and the subconscious influences that we are all wading through constantly. The cultivation of intuition and self-trust as a lifelong hero's journey. In Rick Rubin's recent book, The Creative Act, A Way of Being, he writes, quote, "A point is an idea intentionally expressed. A point of view is the perspective, conscious or unconscious, through which the work emerges. What causes us to notice a piece of art is rarely the point being made. We are drawn to the way an artist's filter refracts the idea, not to the ideas themselves. It is of no use to know your point of view. It's already there, working in the background, ever evolving. Efforts to portray point of view on purpose often lead to a false representation." Unquote. When I approach art that feels preachy or overly self-conscious in this way, or has an overt agenda, I am often immediately turned off by it. To me, art that's worth making and sharing holds so much unknowing, which is part of what makes it so resonant. This is what I try to aim to do on the show, to always be seeking and asking more questions than giving, quote, answers. Rubin goes on to say, quote, "If you know what you want to do and you do it, that's the work of a craftsman. If you begin with a question and use it to guide an adventure of discovery, that's the work of an artist." Unquote. As you'll see, Emily deftly incorporates both of these ways of making, which I think is something we can all learn from. I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. All right, Emily Weiner, welcome to Psyche Magic. I'm so glad to be with you today.
I'm so glad to have you here in my studio, and thank you for inviting me. This is really new territory for me to be talking about with a professional.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's an honor, because I was honestly really excited when I reached out to you and you were open to doing the show. So I feel equally honored, and it's so fun to be in your physical space. Listeners know that we almost always record virtually, but here I am in Emily's beautiful 1890s home in East Nashville, in her studio with her piles of paint everywhere and her incredible paintings on the walls. And it's just a vibe.
Thank you.
And I'm honored that you let me into this sacred space.
It really is. It's a sacred space. It's taken me a long time to have a space like this. And I just love being here. I love inviting people here.
Yes. I mean, I can imagine, because it's amazing. I wouldn't want to leave this space if I were you. I'd be like, you come to me, everybody. Just come on down. Come visit. All right. Well, so Emily, I would love it if for the listeners, you would just introduce yourself, let them know a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So my name is Emily Weiner. I'm a painter primarily, but I also make ceramics. Specifically, I make ceramic frames for my paintings. So I work in oil, like really colorful paintings that have representational imagery, but use kind of these archetypal symbols, which kind of flow in this kind of conversation between artworks. And I'm from New York, and I'm living in Nashville as of 5 years this month. We bought this house, so I'm not going anywhere. I do love it here. I'm a New York transplant.
I love that. That's so funny, Emily. We've been here, my husband and I have been here about 5 years too, almost 6, but just about the same amount of time. Yeah. In East Nashville specifically, because we love this sort of artsy vibe of this part of town. But that's funny. Yeah, similar trajectory. We lived in LA for a long time.
Oh, nice.
Very long time.
Very nice.
Yeah, which was a whole amazing chapter, but we were ready for something new, a little more quiet.
Yeah.
A little more laid back.
Yeah. My sister always says when she visits, East Nashville is like Brooklyn without the bullshit.
Perfect. That is actual perfection.
The schlepping is a lot easier. You can pick up groceries in your car, and not as many people, just knocking into you or...
Brooklyn without the bullshit.
Yeah.
And Emily's adorable dog, Marcel, is here with us. And right now he is just curled up like so beautifully and peacefully
like
in
a
her
little
lap.
black bean.
Oh,
Tiny.
he's the most precious. So Marcel is here with us as well. We've got the gang is all here. I'm so excited to have a visual artist on the show. That is a more rare thing for a podcast format, but I think it's really a fun challenge to try to describe these works in terms of language. And so we're going to have a lot of fun today just exploring ways to speak about Emily's incredible imagery. And I love that you use the word archetypal. So I can't wait to unpack that. As a way to dive in, we are going to pull our tarot card together. And I'm going to just shuffle the deck a little bit and just set the intention that this will just bring us some inspiration for the conversation, which I think is always fun.
Thank you.
Of course.
I always feel like the stakes are very high with pulling cards.
Can be.
Unless sometimes I don't get a card I like, so I pull another one. I don't know if that's not allowed, but
you're totally allowed to. You know what? You're allowed to do whatever you want, actually.
All right.
And I've been known to do the same thing. I'm like, you know what? That's not really what I was looking for. We're gonna do that again.
It's a do-over.
We're gonna have a do-over. But yeah, I really love exploring just the symbols in tarot cards.
Absolutely.
More so than assigning a meaning to them.
That's it.
Yeah, right?
Mm-hmm.
I like just noticing what shows up on any given day and how that resonates for me at that time. It tends to evolve, I would say, just based on what kind of mood I'm in, what I'm going through, what's happening.
Well, that just sounds like a painting process. Like
it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. You're working with symbol, which is
kind of like
ever evolving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is this that's coming up again and again? Why does this shape or guitar or spiral or whatever it is start to manifest over and over?
Yes. What are the different layers of meaning that this can have for me over time as I'm growing and evolving?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's see what we got.
Okay.
We got a really cute card that I love. We got the 3 of Cups.
Wow.
So I'll show the card to Emily.
Look at that.
And then I'll describe the card for the listeners.
Okay.
So this is a really fun card. It just depicts these 3, presumably women dancing. They're kind of lifting these cups almost like in a toast or a celebration. All of this very sort of verdant, rich imagery around them. There's pumpkins and berries and grapes and all kinds of abundance. They have these little flower crowns on their heads. Just a very jubilant card. Really nice vibes.
Okay.
So what happens for you as you look at this card? Emily, what do you notice?
All right. So I don't really know too much about, but I think the major arcana I'm more familiar with. But this, because there's 3 women, I'm thinking a lot about the phases of life.
Cool.
This kind of naive version of the self, and then, the more the erotic self, and then the kind of the wisdom, the person who has kind of gone through all of those phases and has some wisdom to share.
Yes.
And all 3 of them are holding up these cups that look like they're full, or they're trying to fill them up. So what I'm thinking is in my recent work, I'm thinking more about individuation and getting to that point where you feel like these past experiences or these past versions of you might kind of coalesce into something that's more, unified. Mm-hmm. So maybe there's it's interesting. I see 3 here, but I'm almost thinking this is also nodding to 4.
Yeah. And that's so true in terms of just the way that tarot functions with the minor arcana, is that it's a series that builds on itself. So when you pull a card that has a 3 on it, the implied meaning behind the 4 and the 2 are also present. Wow. So when you have a 3, you have one step on an evolution and a journey. And I love that you tied this in with what I understand to be sort of the maiden, mother, crone archetypes of the divine feminine, of the female sort of spirit, which I have not actually heard before in terms of this card. But I really like that take, that those versions of ourselves can all be just partying together somewhere cosmically and just enjoying each other's company.
Yeah, I'm really, because listeners can't see this, but I've been working with these spirals lately, like especially these kind of cosmic spirals.
Yeah.
And they resonate with, the golden ratio and painting, but also this idea of like eternal return, the Fibonacci series that is like present in a lot of mathematics and nature.
Yes.
But starting to double the spiral. So they feel like it's not just this singular path, but it's this kind of coming together of several paths. So the one I'm working on now it's 2 spirals, a double spiral, but I can almost imagine, this, these are 3 women or 3 coming together of 3s. So
yes. I know, this kind of braiding, this weaving in of these different paths and these different journeys. And I especially love this sort of archetypal symbol of the spiral. It was also one of Carl Jung's favorite symbols, because he was always talking about how, in terms of what he would have called like the transcendent function of dreams and the unconscious, is that we are spiraling around the same themes for our entire life.
Oh my goodness.
And that actually is the point.
Wow. See, I just got chills because I am supposed to be a Carl Jung expert, but I've never heard that put that way.
There's always more.
Oh my god. Yeah. Well, I always said that to my students when I was teaching painting in New York and here in Nashville, that when you see that thing come up again and again, you're on the right path.
Yes.
The spiral path. And it's like, oh, wait, I was doing that when I was, a freshman in college. And here is that image again, or that feeling again, or that light again. And it could really be anything, but it comes back again in different manifestations.
Exactly. Because the goal is not that we ever move past or get over the most salient pieces of ourselves and our histories and even our struggles. But the goal is that we revisit them from these more and more sort of awake, evolved, accepting places that we get to through our growth. So we learn to see them differently versus, get rid of them or get over them. And so he loved that idea because it's just this ever evolving process. And there's something, for me, there's something just very freeing about that. Like, it helps me feel like it's okay that I'm still working through a lot of the same themes. That doesn't mean that I'm not doing it right.
Yeah, because it's all about the perspective. You're on this spiral perspective and you may be getting closer, but it's almost like it's parabolic, right? You never get to the center, but you're coming closer with a different perspective.
Exactly. Well, and the other thing I'll say about this card, the 3 of Cups, is that Cups in tarot, just in terms of like the sort of suit and the kind of, we could say like the archetypal meaning behind the suit, is that it has to do with the realm of just the emotional world.
Wow.
And so again, if we're talking about the emotional world, we're talking about depth and this sort of ongoing awakening that keeps happening. And we just make space for whatever shows up, right? Yeah. The healthier that we get, the more that we learn to just make space for whatever is here and learn to allow.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, there's so much allowing and so much sort of just freedom and celebration in this card of where we are.
Yeah. So what else is traditionally read, or if there is a traditional way to read this card, what is the significance of the number 3?
The 3 is definitely I would call it like a culmination in a way. And so a 3 is like a complete number.
All right.
So Maiden, Mother, Crone, this is like all part of one sort of series or cycle. And it doesn't mean that another cycle isn't coming. It means that I'm making space for all parts of this cycle that I'm in.
I love this card.
Yeah.
This is exactly where I'm at.
Yes. Tell us about that if you want.
We're going to jump forward in a minute, but I think it was really when you asked me for a dream, and I had to go back through these, my dream journal from the past, even just 3 years. So much of it was still rooted in this version of myself that was in school or wanted approval from institutions. And it really had to do with who I was in this more formative stage and not feeling like I fully belonged or not knowing what the handbook was supposed to be. And kind of looking at that and thinking, wow, I didn't realize how much that was influencing my conscious life and subconscious life. But I feel like I want to move on from that and understand that that now the institution is more of my, my own. Like I can say goodbye to needing that kind of belonging, because it never really existed. It was there for me to kind of learn in, or structure to grow with it. But it was kind of not like that structure is kind of falling away.
Makes so much sense.
It wasn't real in a way.
Yes.
I mean, it had names and it had, times in my life, but it's a new perspective that I'm hoping to kind of enter into now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and the way I hear you describing it is that there's this sort of almost like an internalization of like some of those themes and structures, whereby I get to approach this now from my own sense of authority and what is needed and what makes sense for me, which is its own sort of kind of open-ended road, right? Like that's its own kind of hero's journey.
Absolutely. Well, you had I was listening to one of your previous podcasts, and your guest, who was a death doula.
Oh, yes.
She said she was thinking about her life as she was an elder in training. And I just was like, oh my gosh, that's it. That's amazing. Like, I'm not a crone yet. But you know what? I kind of would look forward to the day when I would be a crone if I was like an elder, or even after that, an ancestor. And all of that anxiety about like, have I done enough before I get to this age? And that idea of like beauty and love and these things which are kind of, romantic love, which take up so much of your space as a younger person, like feeling validated in a career, just being seen by others. I think this is like, it's great, but it's nice to think about something bigger than that, or what's the phase after that.
Exactly.
And see it in a way that's really positive. I think our society has a very negative idea about aging and what that means, but to be an elder, that's something really special to aspire to.
I love that so much. All of this sort of meaning and value that is coming in those phases of life, versus so often it feels like the narrative is one of scarcity and like there's not enough time and
or enough money or enough beauty.
Yes. And I have to get all of these things done before I hit this phase.
40.
Yes, absolutely. I think that this card is pointing us in this direction of just exploring that freedom in terms of like, here's what's coming, right? So let's just hold that. We will hold that little wisdom and we'll see how it shows up in the rest of the conversation. But yes, you started sort of alluding to this, but I think we should definitely get into your dream that you presented, Emily, because it's a good one. It's a juicy one. So go ahead and give the listeners just kind of a brief overview of the dream itself, and then we'll have some fun just unpacking it.
Well, I have my journal in front of me, so I'm going to kind of read from it. So
perfect.
If I sound a little bit robotic, that's why. Okay, so I dreamt I was about to graduate from Barnard College, where I went to school with the major in studio art. But when it came time for the final critiques and studio visits, I realized that all of the other students had these pristine, beautiful studio spaces next to each other across the street at Columbia College. And I, on the other hand, had been making paintings in this different space. It was abandoned. It wasn't air conditioned. It was like this midtown building, which I could only get to by sneaking through a closet and wriggling up a small hatch, a little passage in the ceiling. And I wasn't sure if I can get my paintings down. And if I did, there may not be any space for me over at, Columbia University, because I hadn't claimed one of the legitimate studios when I was starting the academic year.
Oof. even just the words like legitimate.
Yes. Yeah.
Pristine, right? Like just all of this language around like how things are supposed to look and how they're supposed to be and how they're supposed to function.
Yeah. And I have this picture in my head of that studio space that I had. It actually was, so I went to graduate school afterwards at the School of Visual Arts. And when I went, those studios were like really, in the best way, they were just like very raw and kind of crumbly. but it just meant you had total freedom, right? So, but in my dream, the studio spaces were like that, but after it had been abandoned for 20 years. So it's just like cobwebs and like no real lighting and just like Miss Havisham kind of dust coming through the windows.
Yeah. Little neglected.
Neglected. And like,
perhaps.
I didn't even know when I came back to get my paintings if they were still there. Like if they had been stolen or if they had been, damaged or the rain had come through the ceiling, it was like a big question mark. Like, are these paintings which I made in this space even going to be, can I even get them out to show people?
Right. Yes. Okay. So questions of sort of safety and security, right? Mm-hmm. These things that are so meaningful and valuable to me, are they even safe and protected? You mentioned that this was, part of sort of a theme that you've noticed in your dreams, right? Which is this sense of like, am I included? Am I clued in? Do I have the information and resources that I need? And the thing that jumped out at me about this particular dream, because there's other examples that we'll get to, but with this dream, it's like the nature of the space itself, right?
Yeah.
It's this like hidden place. And you said it was like up, like you had to go up. It's like in an attic,
yeah,
right?
I had to go into a closet.
Yeah.
And I don't remember
first
whose closet. It might have been like my dorm room.
Yeah.
And then get through the ceiling in this little passage, this little hatch. And then I found the studio space up there.
Right.
That nobody else knew about.
Nobody else knows about it. It's inaccessible. And what's so interesting to me about this is that this reminds me of a dream that Carl Jung actually famously had, which was a dream about rooms of a house where there were multiple floors. Like on one floor, it was a very, pristine, clean living situation that seemed very just average, very normal. And then below that, so you had to descend down a flight of stairs. There was a floor that was a little bit more cluttered, messy, perhaps a little unkempt. And then even below that, there was another floor that was more of like an underground basement. And there were all of these ancient kind of artifacts and dusty, cobwebby figures. And so the way that he ended up making sense of that dream for himself is that those floors represented different layers of his own psyche. So the top floor was like the conscious level, right? The sort of ego base level. The bottom floor was more of the unconscious, a little bit more of the messy stuff that we try to sort through. And then that bottom floor was what he ended up referring to as the sort of collective unconscious. Oh, wow. The ancient kind of bank of symbolic knowledge and understanding that we are all born with, according to his theories.
I love that.
So I love thinking about like what an attic might represent, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the across the street studios were this, that institutional space, and my space was not really fitting. It wasn't that. It was more of my own personal. The room where I was wondering if it would ever let any light in, if those works would ever be seen by the people that I thought needed to be seeing those works.
Yeah, because you mentioned there was this tension in the dream around like wanting to be seen, but also like having to go about that through kind of like a backdoor, roundabout way, right?
It's funny when you say backdoor. I remember people in college saying that in a way, like Barnard College was part of Columbia University, and they, it had different admissions, but it was the same university. And so they sometimes said Barnard was the back door to Columbia.
Oh, interesting.
But I thought it was, that I didn't apply to Columbia. I just wanted to go to Barnard because it was like, this is like an all women's school. This is this place. I think, maybe, yes, it's about that like dynamic, but it's a bigger metaphor for the way, you think that straight line path that you think you're supposed to take to get from A to B. Like, if you become a doctor, obviously there's it's clear.
Pretty cut and dry.
How do you, you get your pre-med stuff done, and you go to medical school, you do your residency, and you're practicing. But as an artist, it took me from the time I graduated to now, it's 20 years. And my work is starting to be seen for the first time only in the last 3 years. I have. And so there was 20 years when I was I felt like this is the only thing I want to do. I can't do anything else. I mean, I did. I worked so many different day jobs, but I was so like financially insecure, had no idea if this was just some crazy pipe dream, and looking at other people around me who were so successful in their fields and wondering, how is this going to work out, And just that, maybe that was a metaphor. That space was like, am I doing the right thing here?
Sure.
I'm on my own in this abandoned building.
Sure. Exactly. Well, and I would also offer you a question about sort of your style of working and the way that you find your way to these symbols and your sort of inspiration. Because what jumps out at me is that perhaps the attic is symbolic of this sort of indescribable, unexplainable channeling or like invitation that can happen when we're working and when we're in a state of flow that maybe is not necessarily able to be put into terms that you would see in grad school about how to do good work.
Exactly.
It's like I'm feeling around in the dark and I'm trying to find my way. Yeah. I don't know if I'm making any sense right now, Emily. Absolutely. Please help me.
Yes. I mean, and a lot of that, the idea of like institutions, I've worked in schools for so long. And I think what finally opened up that kind of this idea that like, oh, wait, I have arrived. Like the institutions kind of can't teach you how to do this. They can give you the space to do it, but they can't tell you how. And with, teaching is, students they paid so much money to be at this place and you try to be the authority for them. But the reality is that every artist kind of has to they got to forge it on their own.
They got to go into the attic and feel around for some stuff. And it's kind of hard.
And you kind of have to trust that you're doing the right thing. You're listening to the right voices. You're in the right place. Because if you try, to fit into a different mold, you're kind of forcing something for the zeitgeist or for the approval of others. So my process has really been it's been slow. So that's why I think it's taken this long, because I would not be making this work if I had a lot of attention on my work in 2011 when I graduated.
Makes sense.
School. When I was in school, I was painting landscapes. Yeah. And I was really learning how to paint. And sometimes the landscapes would be surreal. And then by the end of school, I started doing these kind of paintings that were doubles or triples or even quadruples. And this one image would be somehow the same thing, but in a different form. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, so almost like there'd be the theme of the circle, and one painting would be like a tombstone with a wreath on it. Yeah. And then the next painting would be a kind of head wreath that was like with fresh flowers that were somebody wore at a wedding. And then another painting would be like a broken circle. So I didn't really realize at the time what those had to do with each other, but I was reading Joseph Campbell at first. So it was but it was the symbols came first and then the literature came after.
Interesting.
So when I met my husband, I just graduated from school and he had studied theology in undergrad and graduate school. And he had taken a Carl Jung class at Vanderbilt. And I think even in his undergrad, he had read a lot of Joseph Campbell and this kind of idea of a hero with 1,000 faces. And he was like, Emily, you need to read this. I knew so much about Freud. I knew so much about political theory. I had so much my academics somehow did not ever touch on Carl Jung. How is that?
It's not uncommon.
It was not in the zeitgeist.
And it's also not in that sort of evidence-based pocket that you see a lot of programs kind of sticking into. Yeah.
Yeah. So I started reading that and, this is what it's about. My work was never I think it was hard to have a voice because my paintings were not autobiographical and they never were. And I could never fit myself in this identity-based way, even self-portraiture, anything like that. I was not interested in that. I was interested in something that was more collective. And I didn't have words or a structure for it until I started kind of seeing like, oh my gosh, Carl Jung has done this work, this amazing work, has these.
This is what I've been doing. This is what I'm trying to do.
Waiting for.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is a thing.
Yes. And I think when it really started to hit was when I was pregnant.
Oh.
And I did this painting. I did this painting of curtains parting in a landscape, and there was one little white dot in the middle. And actually, even just a little bit before that, I was trying to be an egg donor for somebody, and so this idea of like, will this egg, like this potential, become something? Right. And I didn't put this together until later, but these curtains with this like white, this like luminous moon in the middle with the curtains parting. When I was pregnant, I was like really working on this theme. And I was like, this is it. This like opening up into the unknown.
Yeah.
Like, as a pregnant woman, like, what is going to happen here? Like, what?
The surrender.
Walking through the veil into this empty landscape, this new space that's like, pure potential. And that's when it really changed. Like, I think that's when it cracked open for me. Like the curtain, the veil kind of lifted in a way. And I mean, I have to say those first few years, as a new mom were totally transformative. We realized our lives in New York City were not sustainable. I left everything I had, all the career that I had built. And I didn't know if I would ever make paintings again, honestly. And we moved here to Nashville. My husband is originally from Tennessee to be closer to his family. And it kind of started all over. But and that was 5 years ago.
Wow. On that note, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Like you said, there was something about this sort of opening that was happening for you, where you're entering this new, completely transformative phase of life. And all of a sudden, the work is hitting this different frequency.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's this sort of expansion happening. The veil paintings that you're referencing, I feel like I've seen a few of these. Yes. They're so beautiful. They're so ethereal. And there's something about them that is so expansive and eternal, but also just so present and so right here in front of you. Like it just really hits both of those frequencies. And so, of course, for listeners, we will post photos and links and things for you to see.
Yeah, it kind of starts with this really intense blue gradient. So it goes from like almost a black to a Prussian blue to an ultramarine blue to a cobalt blue to like a light blue. And then these like white curtains are just kind of parallel on both sides. So they almost look like, I don't know, like the Wizard of Oz, or I don't know. It has it looks like a structure and curtains at the same time.
Yeah.
And then the moon, there's like a vermilion moon right in the center with a tiny strip of a landscape at the bottom, kind of like a Santa Fe, like a Georgia O'Keeffe landscape.
Yes.
Or Agnes Pelton, this little, just so for scale, because it's huge sky, this little earth, and like these almost like cosmic curtains, like the veil opening. Or
for me, it creates this feeling of liminality, like a liminal space, like an in-between, right? The sort of like present conscious place and the all, the expansion. And we are at the precipice, right? So powerful.
Yeah.
Yes, I shared with Emily that I am pregnant too right now, and listeners know this because I've talked about it, but I am stepping into my own threshold of, wow, things are never going to be the same ever again. And my dreams are reflecting it for sure. My dreams have gotten super like surreal all of a sudden.
Super weird.
Like the themes are really grand and like epic. We're not in the sort of mundane daily life. We're like somewhere else.
Maybe it's like you're channeling that pure consciousness that's coming in.
Okay, Emily, you said it. You said channeling. Let's talk about it because you have this giant Hilma af Klint
Yes, I
painting
do.
in your kitchen. And I want to know if when you're working, if you feel like there is some channeling happening or what that's like for you, if that feels resonant.
I don't think I'm a witch in that way. I don't know. My sister,
I love that you're using that word.
My sister thinks has some clairvoyance.
Cool.
Has some, I don't know, her energetic kind of experience of the world is really different from mine. Mine is a little bit more, I don't know, like Freudian in this way where I feel like it has to do with all this information that I've stored back in the recesses of these,
the attic.
Yeah, but it pops up as like a non sequitur once in a while, like in my family, my dad is like this kind of hilarious person. He's like Larry David. He's the most difficult person you've ever met, but he's the most freakishly funny person you've ever met because he has no filter.
Yes.
Right? So I think about like lottery balls. It's just like all this stuff just swimming in the soup. And once in a while, one will just like pop out and it's random. But when I'm in my studio and also just like when I'm just not thinking about it, when I'm taking a shower, taking a walk, these images will pop into my brain. And sometimes I know the feeling when it's like, this is it. It's just like instant. It's like, I need to paint this. And for a while, there was imagery of the guitar. And recently, like the white rabbit or these images of the clown, the performer. And after, these are images that started to come up, and I've been painting a lot since having my kid. They had to do with the theater. It was related to these curtain paintings, but then they were performative, these archetypes of like the clown, harlequin, the performer with the guitar, Sappho with a lyre. Just like, what is this? Like, I didn't study theater. Like, what the hell is going on? Why these curtains? And
following these breadcrumbs, right? Like, where are we going? Yeah.
And so I get the feeling that I need to paint this thing. Yeah. And I don't have an explanation yet. I just paint it. And then, so like the backdrop of a painting will be like a Pierrot, like a 1800s, this flowy Pierrot white costume. And then on top of it, I'll drop another symbol. And sometimes the synchronicity of several symbols, one on top of the other, create this third meaning that is not rational, but it has some kind of like link, like this harmony,
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Like, and it was very uncomfortable for a while because I was like, this image of the clown and the magician, it's just not what you're supposed to be painting in contemporary art. It's not very serious. It's very cliche. It's goofy.
Supposed to.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
This doesn't fit in the pristine little like box of the studio that I was taught.
Yes.
But it feels right.
It felt so right. And then I realized it was very autobiographical.
Yeah.
After we moved to Nashville, I got a job at Vanderbilt at the institution, and I was working as their curator in this. They have this really great art collection, and I had this job that on paper was so amazing, and pulling these objects from like ancient Greek artifacts to Renaissance paintings, contemporary art. And I realized I'm just like the performer, I'm just a prop, I'm the rabbit getting pulled out of the hat, making the trick work. But I wasn't the magician.
Right.
Or I'd come home and I was like the role of the mother, and my son was like 2 years old, 1 year old. It was so intense. I was just figuring out how to be like a wife, in like this new house that we bought. And it was everything. I was like compartmentalizing these roles in my life. And I wasn't feeling like a full embodied version of myself anymore. I was like all of these, especially at work, I was just like acting. I was the clown or the magician's assistant. So suddenly I was like, this is right. Like these paintings, this is why they're resonating with people. And nobody laughed. I was scared to like put this up on a wall,
but it was honest. So it resonated.
So honest. And weirdly, I don't know, when I put it out there, I was like, wait, I'm seeing more clown paintings in the zeitgeist. I'm seeing more of this kind of acknowledgement of the performer. I think because maybe a lot of people are feeling this right now.
Yes.
With, the way that we present ourselves and have to sell ourselves and, trying to be this perfect version.
Exactly.
the character we're supposed to be playing.
Yes, there's this sort of collective sense of like presenting an image to the world, right? Just in the age of sort of
Totally
digital life,
yeah,
social media,
yes,
all that good stuff.
And as a painter, you are always trying to be making an image that's like the right kind of image.
Oh yeah.
And that's what it's all about. It's like, oh, she makes that kind of painting? Like, no, we don't want to be associated with that. But nobody was looking at me. So there were no stakes, I mean, the stakes were high because I knew I wanted to be doing this. But yeah, that was the channeling, I guess. It's like listening to those weird, the non sequitur or seemingly random thoughts and those images that pop up.
Yes. I would call that channeling, Emily.
Yeah.
And like you said, it was slow. It has taken a long time to find it. Okay. So yes, we touched on this dream. And I mean, obviously we could just, the whole conversation could just be about the dream, but I want to get a little bit more into your actual process of working now. Yes. So we talked about the way that the images sort of arrive, the way that you've learned to trust them, but let's talk about the actual physical way that you work and even just the materials that you've chosen and the color palette. So tell us a little bit about how your sort of current style and imagery has evolved and how you've arrived here.
I started painting really young. Like drawing and painting was just a thing that was like my safe space.
Okay.
I could like tune out and just draw for hours. And I just remember being up in my room, like even as a teenager, just like drawing, listening to Bob Dylan and drawing.
Amazing. Great combo.
Stuff was kind of rough, like happening at home and, adolescence. And that was like the place I could go. It was just like drawing and getting lost in it. And so I kind of was starting to like hone that way of like going to that space, that like attic or whatever. And I had an early kind of introduction and love for Georgia O'Keeffe. That was like, my mother had these posters in the house. She lived in New Mexico in the 60s. And so I think I was looking at her a lot as that idol, the elder, like the artist. There weren't a lot of examples of women artists.
Exactly. We have to have someone that we can look up to.
Model. Yeah. And then I went to college and I studied, I went to a liberal arts school, but I majored in painting. I was just painting from images. Like I would go to the New York Public Library had this image library. So this was like kind of before the internet was like images were searchable, really.
Yeah.
And also, I just didn't think to paint from a screen. It wasn't a thing yet. So I would go and I'd look they had these folders. So they'd have a folder under M, it would be mountains. And somebody had collected just examples of mountains.
God, what a thought.
So many publications or copied, it was almost like archetypal images.
Absolutely.
Things. So, I wanted to paint like a ship and or an octopus or, whatever. So I think I learned how to painting from photographs, like stock images. Yeah. So I had a lot of that technical training. And then in graduate school, I really started going into like color and like the texture of painting, like materials was my big focus. So I learned how to build a canvas and make the surface really luminous and layer the oil paint like in a way that almost like the Renaissance painters did, so that light will come into the painting and bounce between layers and like radiate through those layers and out.
Wow.
So creating like these luminous paintings. So now that like work with color and color theory, that's usually how I start a painting. Like I make the canvas, I put a really white ground down, like, because that's the foundation to make it luminous. And then I start laying usually like pure color or a gradient on the whole canvas. So from these little canvases to big canvases, I usually start with a gradient. Or if I know I'm going to make something more representational, like this big painting here going to be like curtains, I'll start with a ground that's almost like a silhouette. So like the center is glowing and then the edges kind of have a darker value. So when you lay the paint on top, it glows from the inside. So it has this kind of quality of this, I don't know, like a more kind of an image that's living, breathing, or like shining light.
I was going to say alive.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And the colors themselves are just so rich. These blues are just the most beautiful sort of mixture of just the most gorgeous shades of blue. I just have to say it. I mean, we're in the sort of like, do we call it like the kind of like cobalty family, right? It's just so striking.
Yeah. I mean, it's just amazing, like the kind of the colors that the pigments we have available in this time. Like we were not always, like the ancient Greeks, I heard didn't have a name for the color blue.
Wow.
They called it one, the sea was like the wine dark sea and, in the Odyssey. But I think it was because there were no real blue pigments available. Yeah. And now we have like the not only like the words to describe it, but like the technology to paint from these tubes. So I love painting with these like pure colors and figuring out how to layer them and make them a gradient. So like, these paintings actually is not just cobalt. It's like every blue on the spectrum.
Sounds about right.
But they are kind of put together in a way so that you see them all at once, that you see them as a seamless, like a continuum of blues.
Exactly. Oh, that's such a good way to describe it for listeners. Yeah.
And so, early on, it was like just this straight gradient with like a certain color, like this purple or this like alizarin crimson going into like, I don't know, like a coral color. But I've started to use these gradients in different ways now. So they become a spiral pattern in a landscape or like a slit with like almost like the universe opening up to a second universe behind it.
Yes.
And then some recent paintings have like several planes of like a cosmos. So like an earthly realm, like a celestial realm, and another realm. I haven't really figured that one out in the center.
I love that.
But, existing kind of simultaneously, but like these parallel worlds.
Yeah.
So, and the gradient or like, this idea of like the value creating the landscape is present in all of them. So like we were talking about that idea of like going around, the spiral paths, like the same thing, but 3 different perspectives. I'm kind of trying to do that. And that's what my process is like all the time. I'm just doing the same thing over and over and paying attention to the little fluctuations, like the weird quirks. And that's usually the thing that points me to the next thing. It's like the little passage through. It's like, oh, what was that white rabbit there for?
Yes. I've heard this. Yes. I mean, I've heard it described. I think it was Pam Grossman who coined this term, but she has a show called The Witch Wave that I'm a big fan of. Yeah. But she calls that like following a trail of cosmic breadcrumbs, right? Yeah. The next little piece is leading you into the next idea. But it is, again, I'll use the word slow.
Mm-hmm. It's so slow.
You can't rush that.
Mm-mm. No, and like sometimes, as many paintings as I have out here.
Yeah.
Not as many but anymore, but it used to be like, there's so many paintings. Like I put this one up because that one's like from a while back and I just could not feel like I could not reconcile that. I don't know where that lands in the breadcrumb trail.
Sure.
But maybe one day it'll make sense. Like, why do I have these like, these topiary bushes and like, 1 point perspective moving through this window that's a diamond. Like it's a very random image, but for some reason I was compelled to paint that.
Yes.
And I kept it. When you keep something around that's like that's weird, it's unsettling, but you don't want to let it go. I found that even like 3 or 4 years later, you'll understand where it belongs in the chronology.
Absolutely.
It bothers you because there's something there.
There's like unfinished business.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think about that with dream work too. Like you were showing me that you have this dream journal and that because of our conversation, you were revisiting some older dreams. Yeah. And you described this process that I've had over and over where I will revisit older entries, a dream theme. And I'll start to understand, wow, I had no idea what this meant a couple of years ago. I had no idea why I was dreaming about this topic. And fast forward a little bit and it makes perfect sense now.
That's amazing.
But we often throw it out because it feels nonsensical. It's like, well, I don't know what that means, so I'm not going to pay attention to it. But if we hold on to it and watch it evolve, you look back and you're like, oh,
it's so important.
That's what was going on.
I feel
it's amazing.
I'm so privileged to have a job, and it's like parallel to your job where you have to look at those things. I mean, it's such a wonderful process, but it really is a privilege. I think when you are on the hamster wheel, it's so hard to have a practice like that.
Yes.
like even this dream journal, I started to feel a little guilty. Like, oh,
Yes.
I've only written, like, this is since 2021, and I only have like 10 entries.
Yeah.
I do come to my studio every day, so that's like a version of dream work.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it is. And like you said, it is a privilege because on the hierarchy of needs, we're working with those upper layers of the pyramid, right? We are in a place where because my basic needs for survival are met,
Yes.
thank goodness,
Yeah.
I'm grateful for that. I can turn my attention towards some of these other questions. I have the capability to do that right now.
Yes.
And what a gift,
I know.
but what a privilege.
Yeah. I think also, going back to this tarot card that we pulled, I feel like, in those versions of the self, my earlier versions of myself, I didn't have the stability or the finances
Yes.
to kind of spend this kind of time with my painting.
Trying to survive.
Yeah, of course. And living in a big city and kind of, just like all the things. But, that older version of myself, I kind of wish I could go back and say, like, you're doing it. You're following the
This
trail.
is part of the process.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's another spiral because it's like for those who are in a place on the hierarchy of needs where they can create and ask these bigger questions and share that work,
Yes.
that ripples out and resonates with all of us. That becomes a gift for everyone, no matter where you are on that pyramid right now.
Yeah.
I'm looking to my Georgia O'Keeffes,
O'Keeffe,
right? And they are
yeah.
keeping me going. There's more.
She did.
And it's just, yeah, exactly. It's so helpful and inspiring that can keep sort of paying it forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Have to have those.
Well, funnily enough, when Emily invited me over today, she was letting me know that her studio is, more empty than usual because so much of her work is on the way to Berlin right now.
Yes, it
So,
is.
Emily, tell us about what's going on. This Berlin exhibit sounds incredible.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
We want to hear about it.
It's my first, I guess, I did have one solo show in Europe about a year ago. That was amazing. It was in Bergen in Norway. But this is my first, that was at an artist run space. This is my first show with a big European gallery. And so it's really exciting. It's like a huge deal for me. There's going to be a lot of people visiting the work. It's at Koenig Gallery, it's in this church called St. Agnes. That was a big brutalist church converted recently to a gallery by Johann Koenig, who runs the space. And it really is like, it's a chapel. I mean, it's like, like this kind of, transcendent space. So I'm so excited, and I'm going to be flying out at the end of this month to see it. So all of the information about that show is on my website and at the Koenig website.
Fabulous. We will link to all of that.
Thank you.
How incredible, Emily. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I am just it feels like another synchronicity to have a show in that type of setting specifically.
Yeah.
Right?
It's amazing.
Like you said, just so transcendental. I'm from Houston, Texas originally, and there is a chapel there that's like a, all religions welcome, non-denominational chapel. They have readings from like every major religion, and it's the Mark Rothko Chapel.
Oh,
so you walk in and it's just filled with his incredible paintings, and it's one of the most amazing spaces I've ever seen. But it reminds me of that. It's like creating that type of kind of awe-inspiring space for this type of deeply archetypal, resonant work. It's just so special.
Yeah, it's really special. And it's not where I saw myself like 5 years ago,
Sure.
So, I have to give a shout out to my Nashville gallery, Red Arrow Gallery. They are, a local space that in the last, 5 years are just like, breaking out of this small town model. And they kind of took a chance on me. I was like, had just left my day job, and I approached them about a show that I wanted to do. I had just gotten a grant, and they said yes. And they were like so supportive, and we've been working together, for the last 3.5 years, and it's been everything. I mean, they were like my launching. They're local, and to find that entry into the world stage through like the people in my immediate neighborhood. They're in East Nashville. They are doing such good work. it's surprising. You follow where necessity leads you, and then maybe you'll find that little hatch.
That's exactly right. Well, and that's such a good reminder that we can also look right in our backyard.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
It doesn't have to be, it sounds so like, yeah, I've got this show opening in Berlin in a giant church, but it didn't happen immediately.
Exactly.
It wasn't by accident.
That's right.
Yeah.
Shout out to Red Arrow. I haven't actually been there yet. I need to go. I've heard nothing but great things.
I mean, they're the hardest working women in Nashville.
I believe
in
it.
the arts. I mean, they are turning over shows every month. And
Wow.
There's 2 full-time women working there.
Wow.
Yeah. And
That's not lost on me.
No, they're they're in Mexico City doing art fairs, and they just came back from New York, and they're going to Chicago next week, and they opened a show. It's real. They're
Incredible.
Yeah, they're incredible.
Amazing. One thing we did not touch on, I do not want to end this interview without talking about this, Emily. You make your own frames.
Oh, right.
And
yes.
that is just so, I don't know. When I meet an artist who goes to those lengths,
Yes.
that is just so powerful to me. I'm looking right now actually at one of your handmade ceramic frames.
Mm-hmm.
And I just would love it if you would tell listeners about how that process sort of came about.
Well, I spent a lot of time going to museums in New York.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at a lot of modernist painting, like Mondrian did these frames that were just he made his own. The modernist painters they often made their own frames.
Interesting.
And for a while, frames kind of were out of fashion, and just this whole idea of decoration and design, they were kind of like dirty words in the art world.
The cycles, right?
Yeah. And what was the right thing to do, and the trendy thing, or
out of
trendy,
fashion.
I don't know, what was serious.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to think, well, I want a craft element in my work. This feels really feminist to work with these materials that are women's work materials, especially ceramics.
Yes.
And I just always loved ceramics since I was really young. But then also with this whole, the theater themes coming up, I was really interested in this, framing as a device, as a suspended disbelief.
Yeah.
When you look at the proscenium of a stage, it's you believe whatever's happening on the stage.
Absolutely.
And in a painting, you do the same thing within a canvas. So these frames kind of became that, those liminal space demarcations in a way. So I've loved working with the frames, and they've kind of become as important as the painting itself. It's a way to it's more tactile, it's more material.
Yeah.
And the symbols are very kind of, they're 2-dimensional.
Right.
And the frames can be be in conversation with those.
Absolutely.
Symbols.
Most of them have a sort of a bend, a shape, a movement to them, an organicness to them.
Yes.
And you said that many are ceramic.
They're ceramic. They're all ceramic.
They're all ceramic.
The big ones are wood.
Yeah. Okay.
Because the ceramics don't really hold up. But there's also that element of alchemy in ceramics.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going to happen.
You don't know.
And even seasoned ceramicists, when they make glazes, they don't know how it's going to look like when it comes out, and how the ceramics are going to bend, and
another surrender. We'll see.
That's it. Yeah. So I that keeps me a little humble because I know I can.
I can't control this fully. It's okay.
It's not something I can control. Yeah.
I love that so much. I had to touch on these beautiful frames. Okay, Emily, as we're coming to the end of time, is there anything else that you would like to share with listeners about just upcoming events, things that are on your radar, places they can find you and follow you, just anything you want to share about what is going on?
Yeah. Okay. Well, to follow me, Instagram's really good.
Yeah.
I'm Emily Weiner on Instagram, and I really am I'm taking video of my daily life in the studio. And
awesome.
I'm showing that because I also think it's important, for my former students and for younger artists to see that, this is life in the studio, and it's not always glamorous, and sometimes it is, but I like to lift the veil a little bit. So I think that's the best way to kind of get to know me. And then I shamelessly promote everything that I do. So
fabulous, as you should.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. So Instagram, good place to find you. Awesome.
Instagram, and my website is emilyweiner.com.
Fabulous. We will link to all of those places. Okay. We've got Berlin. Anything else coming up?
I have a show at the end of August in Mexico City.
Fabulous.
And
Get
then,
out of here.
Yes, it's a really cool, kind of like a salon style space that's also Kunin Gallery, but it's by a woman named Karina Carmichael. And then in January 2025, I had a solo show in London at a gallery called Huxley Parlor.
Wow.
So that's what I'm working towards in the next, through the winter.
We've got these little pieces of the puzzle already in place, and then we're working around each of those. That's amazing. Emily. Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so exciting.
Thank you.
We can't wait to just continue following along with your amazing work.
Not sure what the work is going to be. I just know it will be.
Because you're following the trail of cosmic breadcrumbs.
Maybe that will be the title.
Which we love you for.
Title.
Yeah, right? I know. Pam would be proud.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fabulous. Emily, thank you so much. What a fun conversation.
Yes. And thank you for all the insight. I mean, just even thinking about this, doing this and talking about, these dreams that I've had and putting words to these symbols, that's the work. That's the hardest work for me.
I know what you mean. I'm so glad. It can be nice to have just a container, like a reason with which to dig in a little bit and explore, just to give ourselves permission to do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
No.
I'm so glad. I'm glad that you got something out of it. I know listeners are going to love it.
Thank you.
And it was absolutely so fun for me. So thank you again.
Thanks.
That's a wrap for this episode. Thank you again to my guest, Emily Weiner. May you always follow your breadcrumbs, and may your incredible art continue to reach the ones who need it. We'll see you back here next month with another amazing guest. If you want more Psyche Magic, be sure to check out the Psyche Magic Salon on Substack. There you'll find all full and bonus episode archives for the podcast, as well as my weekly written newsletter with magical musings and recommendations for sources of creative inspiration. You'll also find the recorded version of our salon ritual to invoke creative flow. That's psychemagic.substack.com. If you haven't already, please take a moment now to subscribe, rate, and review us on your podcast app of choice. It really makes a difference and helps other people find the show. We hope you'll also follow along with our shenanigans on Instagram and TikTok at Psyche Magic Podcast. Psyche Magic was produced and recorded by me, Jordan Hale. Editing for this episode is by Masuzu Inaga. Our theme music is by Young Summer. Artwork is by Annika Murphy. Special thanks go to Daniel Higbee, Grace Fuse, and Michael McMillan. Thank you so much for listening. I'll leave you with a question. If you must sleep through a third of your life, are you willing to sleep through your dreams too? Get your dream journals out, y'all. Until next time.